Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon to all. So I am Dr. Nuraliza, one of the physiology lecturer in the department. Was given this opportunity to give a lecture on the revision class on the physiology of homeostasis. So these are the outline of my lecture where I will introduce the concept of homeostasis by giving what are the difference between internal and external environment of the body. I will also discuss about the importance of maintaining a constant environment for the body. And in order to maintain homeostasis, there are two mechanisms involved, which is positive and negative feedback. And I will share with you the example. And one of the main function or important function of homeostasis in the body is body temperature regulation or thermoregulation. So what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is actually the maintenance of nearly constant condition in the internal environment. Therefore, in our body, it is essential for our survival because if it is not successful, it can lead to diseases and even eventually death. So what is our internal environment? So our internal environment, we refer to the extracellular fluid because all cells in our body are contained in this watery internal environment where the life-sustaining exchanges occurs. And in our body, we don't have a direct contact with the external environment. So our internal environment, which is our extracellular fluid, perform important function for the body to perform its normal activity. So our extracellular fluid contains all the ions and nutrients needed by the cells to maintain the cell life. And all these cells are contained in the same ECF, therefore it is exposed to the same environment. The ECF is transported rapidly in the circulating blood and normally it will mix between the blood and the tissue fluid. So what are the factors that involve in the maintenance of internal environment, i.e. your homeostasis? So for the whole body to maintain its function, the first one, we need to maintain the pH of ECF within this range, 7.35 to 7.45. Second is regulation of the body temperature, need to be maintained at constant temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. Next is maintenance of water and electrolyte balance in your body. And all the tissues, all the cells need to be supplied with nutrient, oxygen, enzymes, and hormones so that it can perform its normal function. And all the cells and tissue which perform the metabolic activity needs to be removed from the metabolic and the waste product so that it will not interfere with the normal function. In order to perform or maintain the homeostasis, a few body system works together. For example, in order to supply the oxygen and nutrient to the ECF, we have the gastrointestinal, respiratory, cardiovascular, and musculoskeletal system that works together to perform that function. In order to transport the ECF, we need cardiovascular system. In order to remove the metabolic waste product, we use the respiratory and urinary system. In order to maintain the water and electrolyte balance, the urinary, respiratory, and gastrointestinal system works together. In order to maintain the blood pH, which is the acid-base balance, the respiratory, urinary, and hematologic system perform that function. For maintenance of body temperature, there are a few body systems that work together, namely the cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, urinary, musculoskeletal, and the nervous system. And finally, these two systems, the nervous and endocrine system involved in regulating all the other body system in order to perform its function in maintaining the homeostasis. So, in homeostatic control system, we require a few important components. As I mentioned earlier, homeostasis is the maintenance of constant internal environment. So, if there's any change or imbalance, it can act as a stimulus which will then be detected by the receptor. And then the receptor will send the signal or information to the control center, where the control center will process the information and send the information back to the effector organ, where the effector organ will respond accordingly to restore back the changes towards the normal condition to maintain homeostasis. So basically, in order to maintain homeostasis, we require these three main components: receptor that act as a sensor, the control system, and in our body, we have two, the nervous and hormonal system, and the different effector organs. In order to do that, we use the two different feedback mechanisms, namely the negative and the positive feedback, to perform its function. So the first control system in our body that involved in maintaining the homeostasis is the nervous system. And the nervous system that we use here is the autonomic nervous system that control the function of the internal organs. And the autonomic nervous system can further be divided to sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that innervate different organs and perform different functions. And normally it regulates the muscular and secretory activities of the body. So for example, the regulation that involve the nervous system as the control center is the body temperature regulation. Second system that involve as the control center in maintaining the homeostasis is the hormonal system. So basically there are 8 major endocrine systems that secrete hormones to help regulate the cellular function, which complement the nervous system as the control center. So mainly, hormonal system involved in regulating the metabolic functions of the body. Example is a release of insulin help in controlling the glucose level in the body. So what are positive and the negative feedback in our body? So based on the definition, the positive feedback, if there's any change, it will enhance the change to be more until the stimulus being removed from the body. As compared to the negative feedback, it will produce the opposite effect. If the change is an increase, the effect will be a decrease. So the effect is counteracting to the change. So basically, the regulation in the body mainly involve the negative feedback. But I will only share these 4 examples to give an overview what are actually the negative feedback regulation in our body in order to maintain the homeostasis. The first one is the body temperature regulation, the blood pressure regulation, the blood glucose regulation, and the blood calcium regulation. So how the changes in the body detected by the receptor and then information sent to the control center, and what are the changes that occur to maintain or restore the values towards normal. So the first one is in body temperature regulation. I will discuss this in detail later when I discuss about the thermoregulation. But here just to introduce the concept of negative feedback. So for example, what happens if we are exposed to cold stimulus? So in order to maintain homeostasis, which is maintaining the constant body temperature at 37 degrees Celsius, and our body temperature does not fall towards the ambient temperature. So what happens is that there are receptors called the thermoreceptor that detect the drop in the temperature. So the receptor will send the information to the control center that is located in the hypothalamus. And then what happens is that the control center will send information to the effector organ. For example, here skeletal muscle, to cause that person to start to shiver. And when the person shiver, the body temperature will start to increase and maintain the body temperature towards normal, that is the 37 degrees Celsius. Second is in the blood pressure regulation. So what happened in blood pressure regulation is that in homeostasis, the blood pressure needs to be maintained in the normal range. However, what happens if the blood pressure increase? So the receptor that are responsible to detect the changes is the baroreceptor. So baroreceptor will send the signal to the center, which will stimulate the cardioinhibitory center and inhibit the cardioacceleratory and vasomotor center. So what happened following stimulation and inhibition of the respective center is that it will lead to decrease in the sympathetic impulse to the heart, causing decrease in the heart rate, decrease in the contractility, and eventually decrease in the cardiac output. And at the same time, it will cause decrease in the rate of vasomotor impulse to cause vasodilation, causing decrease in vascular resistance. All the effect, which is decrease in cardiac output and decrease in the vascular resistance, will eventually return back the blood pressure towards normal level, normal value. So these are the negative feedback that occur in order to regulate the blood pressure. In blood glucose regulation, what happened? For example, after meal, so it will lead to increase in blood glucose level. So the information will be sent to the signal to the pancreas. Pancreas will start to release insulin. So what does insulin do is that it will stimulate the glucose uptake by the cell and also will stimulate the glycogen formation. When the glucose uptake increase and the glycogen formation increase, it will restore the blood glucose level towards normal range. And finally, the blood calcium regulation. What happens if the blood calcium level increase? So it will stimulate the thyroid gland to release calcitonin, and calcitonin will stimulate the deposition of calcium in the bone. Therefore, it will not cause an increase in the blood calcium level, but instead it will restore the calcium towards the normal value in order to maintain homeostasis. The other mechanism that occur in the body in order to maintain homeostasis is positive feedback. So I will share with you 4 examples of positive feedback that normally occur in the body. The first one is what happened during parturition. So during parturition is that when the term, so the head of the baby will start to push against the cervix, and this will initiate and send impulse to the brain, to the center located at the pituitary gland, and pituitary gland start to secrete oxytocin. So what happens is that when oxytocin released in the circulation, it will stimulate another uterine contraction, and this will cause the baby's head to push again towards the cervix. And what happens is that during positive feedback mechanism, normally it will initiate what we call the vicious cycle. So another contraction will stimulate another release of oxytocin, and another contraction will occur, and the whole process will be repeatedly occurring until the strongest contraction and enable the baby to be expelled from the uterus. So then only the positive feedback stop, meaning that once the stimulus start, it will be enhanced and continuously follow the vicious cycle until the stimulus being removed. Same with lactation. What happened during lactation is that when the baby suck the nipple, the impulse will be sent to the pituitary gland, where the posterior pituitary gland will start to release prolactin to cause milk production, and the posterior pituitary gland will start to release oxytocin for milk ejection. So successful baby suckling a few times will initiate the positive feedback during lactation, and the milk finally being ejected. Third example is what happened during blood clotting mechanism. For example, if there's a break or tear in the blood vessel wall, it will start to initiate the blood clotting mechanism, and where platelet will be released and bind to the tear or damaged site, and it will stimulate a release of chemical. So when the chemicals being released, it will attract more platelet to bind to the damaged site until the clotting process complete and form or seal the break or tear. So the mechanism, the positive feedback mechanism will be enhanced until there's no more a stimulus that will initiate or continue the positive feedback mechanism. And last, positive feedback mechanism occurs during depolarization stage of action potential, where during depolarization stage, sodium channel will open, and this opening of sodium channel will initiate the opening of the adjacent cell to open its channel, causing more sodium to enter and more depolarization will occur. And the process continue following the vicious cycle until the whole area being depolarized and the membrane potential reach the threshold value to produce action potential. Then only the positive feedback stop once it's reached its goal. So the heat gain mechanism, where the heat production via the two process, heat production in the body or heat gain from the environment, is that the heat production in the body can be due to the basal metabolic activity or the muscular activity, for example, due to muscle tone, or when you are doing exercise, or due to the shivering process. And the heat gain from the environment can be via radiation, direct exposure to the sun, or conduction, contact with the hot surface or hot object. For example, your body exposed to the hot water. Whereas the heat balance, the heat loss mechanism can be via these three mechanisms: from the skin, from the lungs, or in the excreta, via the same process: radiation, conduction, convection or evaporation, perspiration, or from the sweat. So there are three important components involved in thermoregulation, which is the first one is the thermoreceptors. We have two different types of thermoreceptors, whether it is located peripherally or centrally in the hypothalamus. So this thermoreceptor will detect any changes in order to maintain homeostasis of the body temperature. And then the information all will be compiled and sent to the integrator or temperature control system in the hypothalamus. And finally, we have the thermoregulatory effector mechanism, where the thermoregulatory effector mechanism can be stimulated if the mechanism was activated by heat or if the mechanism was activated by cold. So here, if the mechanism was activated by heat, so the two different type of mechanism will occur. The first one is the mechanism to increase the heat loss. So what happens is that to increase the heat loss, cutaneous vasodilation will occur, or heat loss will occur via sweating. And in the mechanism to decrease the heat production and heat gain from the environment, a person will become anorexic, and lethargic to reduce the physical activity, to reduce the heat production from the body, or behavioral response. For example, to find shelter to decrease the heat gain from the environment. Second, the thermoregulation is if the mechanism was activated by cold. So what happens is that two different mechanisms will activated in order to maintain constant body temperature. The first one is the mechanism to conserve heat, where cutaneous vasoconstriction will occur, or pilot erection, erection of the hair in the body, and the behavioral response to conserve heat, for example, curling. And second mechanism to increase heat production is, for example, shivering, continuous contraction and relaxation of the skeletal muscle, or due to the chemical thermogenesis, for example, increase in sympathetic stimulation, increase in secretion of catecholamine or tyrosine, where all this will start to initiate heat production in the body. And also behavioral response. For example, to increase heat production, a person will start to increase the physical activity. So I have come to the end of the discussion or lecture on the homeostasis topic, and particularly I discussed more on the thermoregulation concept. So this is the last slide. So with that, I thank you.